Spooky Interviews from Spooky Ventures, Number 6, Lori R. Lopez. As demonstrated by your recent Dark Verse The Shadow Hours Illustrated Edition, you not only write but also do illustrations. Can you tell the viewers a bit about your artwork?
This is Dark Verse. It's quite a large book filled with a lot of dark poetry and illustrations. As you see, the cover art and the back is pretty colorful. I primarily do black and white for the interiors. Well, 50 unique pieces and some repeated. There are flies throughout and just quite a variety of monsters and ghouls and things. I used to do artwork in many different mediums: paper, canvas, acrylic paints, even oil, pastels. I did markers, pencil. I like pencil. And now I do most of it on the computer. So I find that works pretty well for illustrating my books and doing my cover designs. So it's a lot of fun, and I feel it gives another level to my ideas, to my creativity, where I can convey my visions through both the writing and the art. So I think it works out pretty well.
You are also publisher for your projects. What are some of the challenges of publishing, and what advice would you give for people looking to get into it?
We do publish together, my sons and I, with our company Fairyfly Entertainment, and we're all creative. We all have skills and different things that we bring to it, and my son Raphael does a lot of the publishing with me. It is a lot of effort, and it does take time from the creative work, but you can also be creative with it. And I would tell anyone wanting to get into publishing, whether their own work or for someone else, to develop your own style and work hard at it, and just don't give up. Be patient. It all takes time, and hopefully you will succeed if you give it your best, and that's the main thing we have to do.
It seems that you like doing book series. What can you tell the viewers about that?
Yes, I do seem to have various book series, not all of them out yet, but I have many projects that I've started and need to find time for. I do have a poetry series that's already up to 3 volumes, my Poetic Reflections books, and they're actually what Dark Verse is based on. The darker poems from it I took from the first 3 volumes and put into this, and as you see, I write a lot of dark poems, but I also write humor, and I write serious ones as well, and I do the same with prose. So it's great in my Poetic Reflections series that you can read all of that, and it's quite a variety. But in dark verse you can just enjoy the same vibe throughout. It's a very focused thing, although I do have humor in it too, but not nearly as much as in the Poetic Reflections series. And Dark Verse is also a series. I plan to do more than one volume. I have another series called the Dark Mr. Snark, Mr. Snark series. It started with the first book, The Dark Mr. Snark, and there is the Darker Mr. Snark coming this year in 2019, and next year will be The Darkest Mr. Snark. So that's a trilogy. I have other series too besides books. I have short story series, and that will all eventually be published in one volume. And I have not been able to do a lot of the sequels yet, but that is definitely on my agenda for the next year and thereafter to spend more time on some sequels. But I have a fantasy adventure horror series, the tome trilogies, that I have one book out, Dance of the Chupacabras, and I'm hoping to get to the second one. It's written, but I need to wrap it up and publish it. And there's also a third one already drafted too that I need to take time. But I have all of these new ideas, and some are standalone and some are for new series, so it's always a balance of what I can do besides balancing writing and doing the artwork and the publishing, a lot of that, and it's quite a process. So
Do you remember when you first became fascinated with the horror genre or spooky things in general?
oh yes, I have been a horror fan since I was very small. I loved Frankenstein movies. I was really young, and I just loved them. I loved all of the old classics, the Dracula, Wolfman, Phantom of the Opera. There was the Blob, and Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. Those were just really fascinating to me as a little girl. My first favorite book, before I could read, and after I learned to read still, was Where the Wild Things Are, which featured monsters. So that was already a sign. And in 7th grade, I won third place in a contest for a werewolf play. I was just a fan, and I was also wanting to create it myself, since I can practically remember. I just really took a shine to it quite young.
Do you have a favorite medium, be that print or film or other, for horror?
I would say that I equally love films and books. And horror is definitely my favorite. I do enjoy a variety of them, but yeah, it's really the old classics, but there are also some not as old, like Halloween, not the newer ones, but the classic ones of that, which are not as old as the other classics, the black and white. But I do love a lot of the older ones, and I guess Halloween, John Carpenter's, is not so new anymore, but to me it's still fresh. And there are newer ones like the Babadook that's really quite scary. So I was really impressed with that, and I do enjoy that, and when I can find time, I've always enjoyed reading horror too. But since I'm spending so much of my time creating it, I don't have as much time for that anymore, or the actual uh, brain energy when at the end of a long day. So I do find that watching films probably takes more of my time than reading now, and I find it inspiring as I do reading it, because it puts you into the mood. It's great to see something about ghosts if you're writing about ghosts, or about monsters and that sort of thing. It just really, it helps to like set the atmosphere, as music can do. I like classical music too, very dark type of certain music, and that can also be very good for that.
Who are some of your favorite horror creators?
Well, when I was growing up, the Universal movies, uh, they were they were really great, and there were the Hammer, Frankensteins, and other things. I like, a lot of the films like that. And as far as books go, there was Robert Louis Stevenson's Jekyll and Hyde, and the Hunchback of Notre Dame. I found horror in it. I found a lot of emotion in it, by Victor Hugo. Mary Shelley. Now that's the one I have to talk about, because Frankenstein, when I read the novel in 5th grade, it just really touched me with the emotion conveyed, as well as, the horrors in it. And I just found it unforgettable. It just really, really has been something that stayed with me just always. And I think that Dracula was also one of the main ones too, by Bram Stoker. It was just very, very dark and chilling, and really a lot of emotional depth to that too, and that's what I look for in horror, and I try to convey that in my own. So I would say, those. But then later, as an adult, I found Stephen King and Dean Koontz, and those were some of my favorites then too, after the ones from growing up that have stayed with me. But I would also have to mention Lewis Carroll as an influence. I find there are some very frightful elements in the Alice books, like the queens. They're they're really quite characters. But I love the humor in it too, and I do put humor in my horror as well. I put humor in just about everything I do, so I'm sure that's part of it, why I was so fascinated with the Alice books. But I'm a big fan, and as equally with Frankenstein and Dracula and those.
What are some of your favorite horror books?
I would have to say that the favorite horror book is Frankenstein. There's just, yeah, no other that's quite the same to me, as far as how it affected me. But again, Dracula was also very very much an influence and just a really great, great novel and great characters. Uh, I really can't pick one Stephen King that I would say stands out to me more than the rest. I've experienced them both in book and film, and I really enjoy his writing and his characters and stories. Dean Koontz, because of the humor in his writing too, I think that stands out. But I have to go with Frankenstein as my favorite horror book.
What about your favorite horror movies?
Again, I'm going to say Frankenstein as far as horror films because, well, there were a number of them and there still are, but I'm always ready to watch another one because it is something quite fascinating. And I think what Mary Shelley did with them, with the well, with her book and with the characters in it, as far as the whole idea of the period it was set in, and just the bringing to life of the dead and I think the whole setting of it was really something that has influenced horror tremendously, as well as science fiction, and I just think that's quite an achievement, and for someone so young, so I admire that too. And I would say that that's really the best. The movies and the book, and I know there are others I love, but I'll go with that.
We can't live by spooky alone. What other things captivate your interests?
Well, I enjoy a variety of types of movies and shows, mostly dark ones and humorous ones, and but also I like crime novels, crime movies. I like ones of families, family entertainment. I'm a Disney fan. I like a lot of the fairy tale type of stories and the movies based on them. I'm a big fan of fairy tales, and I plan to release at least one fairy tale collection, but a darker one. And I like to play badminton with my sons without rules. I like to do things without rules. That's how I write. A lot of the time it's bending the rules, and I like to walk in a forest. I'm an animal lover, and I have various interests like that, and it's I do feel family's important, and so we spend a lot of time together. We also work together, but we don't seem to get bored with that, so that's a good thing. And we have cats. They find us, and we take care of them. So they're really quite interesting to see their various moods and everything that they bring joy to your life. Any kind of animal, I think. And we also do some activism for animal rights and for the environment, climate. We've been doing some things like that, and protesting war and things. So it's a lot of about what time there is. You know, we try to find time to play games and do other things to relax, but I do find that writing is a relaxing thing. It's what I love, and the artwork and all of that. And we also are working on film and music together with our company, and so that's there are interests. So it's great to work on things that you love. So, and it's not all about horror. It's not all spooky, but it is something that I enjoy. So,
Have you created works in other areas beyond horror, spooky territory?
I actually do work in various genres. Sometimes all at once, and sometimes I do separate them. I have a fantasy novel titled The Fairy Fly that we named our company after, and it has a lot of humor. And it's about seeing the world from a smaller perspective. I have some that are a combination of horror and fantasy and humor and adventure, and like An Ill Wind Blows, it's a novel. And I have books for children. I plan to write more, some spooky, some humorous, and illustrate them. And I do combine art with my writing a lot. And I yeah, I try to cover a lot of different territory. I don't like to just do one thing, so but horror, I am doing a lot of that, as well as a lot of fantasy, I would say. But humor, it's just all over. You find it in everything I'm doing, pretty much. So,
If you could sit down to dinner with any three people, living or dead, with whom would you be dining and what would be on the menu?
well, it will be no surprise, but I would like to have dinner with Mary and Percy Shelley and Frankenstein's monster, because all of them are vegetarian or vegan like me and my sons. So I think that would be great, and we could talk about animals, because they were vegetarian for animals, and that's the reason that I became a vegetarian at age 15. So it would be really interesting to talk about that and about the writing, because I do poetry and I do prose and horror, and so I think we'd have a really fun conversation. And the monster, well, I just really would like to tell him how much I care about monsters. Since I was a kid, I've just been really fascinated with monsters. So I'd really enjoy talking to Frankenstein's monster, because he's really the monster. So I think that would be a great evening, and I think my sons would like to join it too. So I think it would be good to have that experience. And I think we would have pizza and lasagna, vegan of course, and probably some cocoa to drink, also vegan. So not everyone might enjoy that meal, but I think they would, and I think it would be great. So.
What else would you like the viewers to know about that we haven't touched on in this interview?
Well, I do have another Mr. Snark coming out this year, and I do have a ghost collection also coming out this year. I'm going to see if I can get any more books than that, but for sure next year I'm going to have a good amount. So I have some very special projects coming next year, and I hope to get to them. But we'll be doing music and some film too, and of course just keep checking, because there are always new books coming. My imagination never rests, and I tend to jot down new ideas when I'm trying to sleep, and I cannot control it, so it's just like it has to come out, and that is why I write. That is why I create the spooky stuff, the horror, the humor, the fantasy, and whatnot, suspense, and all of that. So I think if you check what I've already written, there's quite a bit there to entertain, and you can be sure there will be plenty more to come. So thank you very much. I enjoyed having this conversation. Thank you.
Spooky Ventures is the home for spooky content and spooky merchandise on the web. Check it out today at spookyventures.com. And remember, always keep it spooky.